Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
And I think where we fall short with delegation is when we fail to think of it as an action of growth or empowerment for someone else. Right. And once we were able to change our mindset here, it really, really made a difference in our organization because, and we'll talk about this, delegation and our lack of understanding and ability to do it effectively was one of the main things that were broken in our culture. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Look at you back in the U.S.
I am.
So great to see you.
Likewise. I'm glad to be home.
I think people have really been interested about your trip and your voyage on your 50th birthday. I've certainly gotten a lot of questions about it. So I would love it if you would share just some highlights.
Wow. I mean, it was, I don't know. I know we've talked a lot about it, and I know it was talked a lot about leading up to it. I'd never done anything like that. I've not been stepped away from the business and certainly home for a month. And 3 of those weeks we were in Paris, and then the last 4 or so days we spent in Berlin at a show. But yeah, it was incredible, and I in many ways it was exactly what I had thought it would be. And then there were just some aspects of it that really surprised me. And I went there with the intention to stay pretty connected, and then about a week or so in, I decided to kind of disconnect. And really, part of the time I was there alone. So on the front end, I was there with my friend whose apartment I stayed in, and then Mackie and her friend joined, and I had friends meet for my birthday. But in the middle, I was alone in Paris, and I think I was a little caught off guard with, again, not the activities, because that all played itself out in a way that was awesome. Sometimes things were planned, sometimes they weren't. But I found myself into some pretty unfamiliar territory. I really did. I haven't spent a lot of time alone, and that one was new for me. And I learned some things about myself even at 50, and so it's an interesting time.
Which was kind of the point.
It was. I mean, it was. I knew I needed it. And I knew I needed, we're making transitions here, transitions in my personal life. Mackie's graduating. There's just, it was the right time to do it. I guess I just didn't expect some of the emotions to kind of hit me the way that they did. But it was great. It was great. Well,
as Brandi Carlile would say, it's right on time.
It was
in multiple ways.
In many ways, it was right on time. And then, I hope that our listeners have listened to the hacked episode that you all so graciously celebrated my birthday. I knew something was planned, but I didn't know how you were going to do it. And to be over there and to hear that, I didn't know. And then when I saw the title, I was like, oh, great. This is either going to be a roast or on the worst side, a eulogy. And to see how you artfully, and I know you and Jordan worked hard on that, to make it about leadership and to honor my birthday with something that I've been working so hard on, is to be a better leader and inside, here at the office and in my life. That was probably one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. And to, hear from, you and Jordan, of course, and then Marcy and Mackenzie and Hannah, and then the 2 amazing letters from my friend Raina and Mackie Payton, my daughter. It's a gift that I'll always cherish. And it really, I think, of all the things that were said, the fact that this journey that I've been on and will continue to be on with all of you, hopefully, and our listeners for sure, is that, human leadership is something we have to work towards and we need more of. And to think that I've headed down that path and that I've been making an impact is, it feels great, especially with my mind being very much focused on legacy and next. And to think that part of my legacy is starting to take shape as being a good human leader, it means a lot. So,
you know, what's interesting is I haven't even talked to you about this,
Okay.
But multiple people wanted to be involved. Like I had to kind of narrow it down. So in terms of
that makes
impact
me
you're
feel good.
making, I mean, people wanted to be in here and recording and talking about you in a human leader capacity, which was really exciting for me. And then just yesterday, I was sitting in the room, someone told you that they spoke with someone who said that you changed their lives. So it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening. And you are a model, a role model for all of us. So thank you for that. I'm glad it was a good birthday. I'm glad you had a wonderful voyage. We're so glad you're back.
I did. It feels good to miss people and to feel missed. So I guess distance does make the heart grow fonder. So
speaking of feelings, something that was occurring to me when you were talking about the emotions that you were not, really expecting to come forth while you were on your trip. Thank goodness we just read Atlas of the Heart.
I'm telling you, we weren't messing around with the title or the episode as to why you need to be reading it now. And I thought about it a lot. I didn't take the book with me because we finished it before I left, but to have that knowledge and to be able to sit with my emotions and really be able to put a name to them, it was very helpful. It was helpful to feel some of the things. I felt loneliness. But in a good way, in a healthy way. And speaking of, it's like I learned about myself that I do like to be alone in certain ways and at certain times. And then there's other times where I hate it. And by the way, I hate to eat alone.
Yeah, me
too. Sometimes I do eat alone, but I just haven't thought about it. But when you're forced to do it multiple times a day, I was like, that was awful.
Thanks. Let's share a pancake.
Yeah, there were a lot of Parisians who ended up being part of my meals or coffees or wine times. Yeah. Lots of new friends.
Nothing wrong with that.
No.
That's very good. Well, good. Well, I'm glad we had read that book. I mean, if you haven't listened to Atlas of the Heart, our episode on Brene Brown's book, please do. It's a very, very good one. You'll see the impact if you'll read it. And when you're going through, an emotional time in your life, turning 50, whatever it is that's going on, it's certainly a nice guide.
It is. I mean, we have graduation coming up. There's a lot of students. First of all, if you want to get the best graduation gift there is to someone, Atlas of the Heart is certainly something that needs to be on your list. But even though for the parents that kids are graduating and moving on to the next chapter, it's definitely a tool and a resource for you to use. Again, I could fill in the blanks with all the changes in our lives or things that we're going through, but definitely with graduation upon us, it's a great read for the graduate and for the caregivers and parents. So
if only Brene had talked about delegation. So I will transition.
Okay.
If only Brene had talked about delegation and the dilemma that it poses for leaders.
Yep.
This is really what we want to talk about today. And I'll say this one hits close to home. So most of what I'm going to be asking you, and then I know that you'll respond because I know a lot about what you think, has come from within this organization. So this is in coming out.
Yes.
Our insides coming out, the full exposure here.
Right.
So let's talk about delegation and tell me, I think this is important. First of all, why is this such a dilemma for people?
In its root reason, I believe, to answer that question is that we have the wrong mindset about delegation. And to follow that, I don't think that we see it as something that we need to learn how to do properly. It almost goes into the same thing that we talked about, and I forget which episode, but the trust episode. It's just something inherently we think we know how to approach, or because it does happen naturally within us, trust does. But then, the way we broke that down, when we think about it intentionally, we can be so much better at it. And delegation is one of those things. And, when you think about obstacles for delegation, it's most commonly is I don't have the time to do it. And that's the easy one. Back to it, I don't think people know how to delegate. Right. I don't think we've seen it as something we need to learn how to be good at, that there's processes for being great at delegation. And, it's been treated more as like, let's just hand this off.
Right.
And I'll dive into the chronic issue we had at our company here in a second. And then I think the other common thing that you can read when you study this particular topic, and I studied it for a couple of years, is that I don't want to lose control. If I give this to someone else, I'm either going to lose control of the quality, or I'm going to lose almost a piece of my own self identity by transferring this to someone else. So again, I think where we fall short with delegation is when we fail to think of it as an action of growth or empowerment for someone else. Right. And once we were able to change our mindset here, it really, really made a difference in our organization because, and we'll talk about this, delegation and our lack of understanding and ability to do it effectively was one of the main things that were broken in our culture.
It was eroding it.
Oh, it was absolutely eroding it. So, you know, again, we've lived this. So,
all right. Is there anything that you observed? Like, what were some of the triggers that you saw happening internally? And this is where the insight is going to come out now. We're going to open up the coat.
Yep.
What was happening? What were you seeing?
Well, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, we had an attrition issue. Yeah. We had people leaving, which is going to happen in any organization. And at the same time, ours was, in my opinion, in your opinion, what we wanted, as much as we pour into people, we still had an attrition problem.
Right.
And we didn't need to look at our numbers against other agencies, other marketing agencies. That didn't really matter. We didn't need those benchmarks because we would beat that every time. But they were leaving, and it was the way they were leaving and the things that they were telling us or not telling us. They were maybe telling other people. Right. Where you could start to identify the issues. Obviously, we've talked a lot about some of those issues in previous episodes around my leadership style, the leadership styles that I allowed around here, the attitudes and things. But it was also in the way that we were teaching people or the way we weren't teaching people. Right. And so through this observation process, I started to realize that, and this most commonly happened with those of us who had been at the company for a while, because we possess the knowledge, right? And so what I noticed about the way we were approaching delegation is that one of the first things I observed is that we would say, the intention was, I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And sometimes that was exactly what came out, but often it was with the comment around, I need to get this off my plate.
Right. Oof.
And I heard it, the first time I really heard it, it was like I was hearing it every 10 minutes after that, which is a major exaggeration. But it pained me so much to think about being on the other side of, I need to get this off my plate. I need you to do it. I understood in that moment how we had almost a bad habit.
Right.
Even though that wasn't always the intention, words matter.
They do.
I mean, Brené's taught us that, right? Language is our way to connect.
Yes.
And we were connecting in a very poor way in that particular instance. Other ways that it would come out is, this is just not as important.
Yeah.
This is not important, so you do it because I have something more important to do.
Which also feels terrible.
Yes. And so then I think the one that stood out the most, and because it was the one that I will tell you I championed more than not, was nobody taught me how to do this. And so, I just had to figure it out, and so should you. Like, here's what needs to get done. No one taught me how to do this. And I know that that's something that definitely the most tenured of us suffer, not suffer, but we definitely were, if the word is guilty of saying a lot. And I get it for a young startup organization. Yeah. We did do everything and no one did tell us what to do. But just because that was so years 1 through 5 doesn't mean that it's the right thing. And for a company who wants to scale and build better, and create an environment where people can be better versions of themselves, that's not how you approach delegation. So I would say that's, you ask, where did I first identify it? It was really when I was taking a deep look at our culture and what was causing the unhealthiness of it. And this was a big area that stood out. And in that moment, I realized we just weren't approaching it in a healthy way. And I started to, again, study, like, what what is delegation and how can we do it better? And I saw a study that really stood out to me as being, and I forget how many survey respondents it was, but the survey said, they asked, do you think your company, are you worried about your company's ability to delegate? And over 50% of the respondents said yes. And those same respondents, less than 25% of them actually had training on delegation. So there was a correlation between lack of training and the ability to effectively delegate. And so, again, it was obvious to me that we had a gap and we just weren't conscious of how we were delegating. And I honestly think there's something inherently icky with the word. Mm-hmm. Because it's not a delegate, it almost insinuates something of, I'm handing this off to you.
That's right.
So I'm really big into kind of reframing things and putting us in a position of a different mindset. So I've positioned delegation at this company as being transfer of knowledge. And delegation is part of that. It's the final step, and we'll go through the steps that we created for our company to share with our listeners. But once we started thinking about it as transfer of knowledge, it puts the person who possesses the knowledge in a position to really help someone grow in development, and the person receiving the opportunity to be delegated to feels empowered and feels like honored in a way to learn this, or to have the trust from that individual or the organization to learn something new and hold responsibility for something. Because again, everything around here is an important. It's important. Our work is important. And so I think once we changed our mindset around that, it really honestly was a big leap forward for our culture when we started to think about this particular area of our business differently.
Yeah, so it was about 2 years ago. I mean, so this is fairly recent.
Yeah.
Of all the things we've talked about, like, I mean, we're always working on things, but this is something that has directly been addressed and delivered from you over the last 2 years. And I remember thinking, and I remember talking with other leaders about it when you were rolling this out, this framework. You delivered a framework to us as a helpful guide. And I remember us thinking, like, praise the Lord. Like, that was the thing. It was like, praise the Lord. Like, we don't know how to do this. Our leader has figured out how to do this. And now we have a framework. So can you talk about the framework? And there's two main areas that you really centered around. Will you talk about those a little bit?
Sure. So again, when I think about our company's ability to scale, and at the time we were dealing with attrition, so we were hiring new people, and then we were growing at the same time. So we were needing to hire more people for that. So we were filling positions, and what we weren't able to do was to keep up with the delegation, yes, but also the training. So I started to really think about transfer of knowledge in a wider scope than just delegation. And so then it led to, if we're going to effectively teach and delegate, we need to really think about, there's two phases. In my opinion, and our framework includes two phases, which is training and then coaching. And delegation is kind of weaved into this, but we like to think of it, and I wanted the mindset of both parties, the delegators and those being delegated to be thinking about, I'm in a moment of being trained, and now I've transitioned from a training moment into a coaching moment. So if training is literally showing someone what to do, and coaching being guiding. So if those are the two, again, the two essential stages or phases, however you want to call it, if you look at phase one of training, we need to start with, what is the task at hand, or what is the project, or what is whatever's the thing. Yeah. What is it? And why it is important. And we were completely skipping the why. Yeah. And I see it in other organizations too. And I know leaders out there at all levels are struggling with delegation. And we're going to talk more about the different types of delegation, because I do want to speak to them differently. But in this case, let's just all get our head around things that we're doing that either we need to learn from others or that we need to teach others. So introduction, what is the task and why is it important? The next step in our process is observation. I'm going to do this task and you're going to watch me do it. So I'm the possessor of the knowledge, and now I'm going to show you physically how to do this. And that gives you the chance to ask questions, but I'm showing you. So I'm still doing, and I still hold the responsibility for the task. Step 3 is collaboration. Let's do this together. And let's work on it together. And I think that, again, not every task that you have come available or thing that needs to be transferred is going to follow all 5 of these steps. But if you oftentimes it does, especially in our work. And again, the different types of delegation we'll talk about in a sec. So then once you've collaborated and you've done it together, now it's time to go into what we call the coaching stage. And coaching is guiding and letting the person do the work, but you're there alongside them. But they're doing the work and you're there. And that could be physically, or that could be, how to get it started. You go for, and let's have these check-ins. And
right.
so then you kind of, the 4th phase, we call that evaluation. So you're doing the work and I'm going to watch. So that's what the person's doing the work, and the coach in this instance is providing or observing and providing feedback. And then actually the final step in our process is delegation, to where you've transferred the knowledge, you're present and providing help if aspects of the task changes, or if there's some external element that you're there to help them navigate it. But honestly, this is where the delegation is come to, they have the responsibility. It's the transfer. And this is a process that once you get better at these steps, and that's why when I was coaching the management team on this particular framework that I had created, was I wanted us to be very specific, because we had to practice. We had to get better at this and be very intentional with it, so that then it just becomes natural. And maybe you skip a stage or 2 depending on the levity of the task that you're transferring, right? And so, but I knew enough about learning things that we had to have a process that all the different types, the Enneagram 1s, they needed the 5 steps. The Enneagram 7s, we needed them too, but for very different reasons. And so I knew that about our organization, and I wanted to put us in a position to be better at transfer of knowledge, because it was one of the things, that was eroding our culture, as I've said, but it was also a barrier to growth.
Oh, yeah.
And so because of that, this intentionality in creating these steps, I'm surrounded by leaders and a management team that are way more adept at teaching and coaching, quite frankly, than I am. But I think everyone admitted in that moment we needed a reset. And again, doing the research, it was almost me pulling from delegation study, coaching and training study, and creating a framework that was simple, easy for us to remember,
right.
and something that you all could teach as well.
Right.
So it was more of our way, but I know that for those that we've shared with through the years we've been working with this, it's been a help. And so that's why we decided to do this. It's a common topic, actually, and why we decided to do this episode. So
right. And training really is, in my opinion, it's not the marathon. The training is the sprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's let me show you this once, let me show you this twice, let's go through these motions, and then I'm going to move into coaching, probably indefinitely, because this is probably something you're going to be doing over and over again, and we're going to evolve, and we're going to need to shape, and we're going to need to change. And so I find myself most of the time in coaching.
And we have varying examples of these things. And again, we've said this before, but in our organization, we don't look at any thing that needs to be done as less important than anything else. No. Now, there are priorities. Absolutely. There's things that weigh more in terms of what it takes to learn how to do something.
Right.
And I would hope this for most organizations, that because it needs to be done, it shouldn't be valued less, because we know in our organization, if we value steps or task 2, 6, and 10 less than we do the others, there's eventually going to be a quality issue.
Yes.
And again, if someone from NASA or the aerospace engineering world, you have your own delegation process and teaching and training. This is for the
marketers of the world,
the marketers and then businesses of the world.
Yes,
I definitely know that the discernment of our listeners, they can definitely decide that for themselves. But I do think that the being intentional about how you teach and coach someone, it seems pretty basic.
It does.
But we weren't doing it
well. No.
We were not doing it well. No. That doesn't, we got a lot right, or we wouldn't be here today. But now when I look at how people are growing in our organization, and I look at the quality of work in our organization by people who've been here 6 months. Well, I don't think we have anybody here less than 6 months now. We're really turning the dial on tenure and people sticking around. But when I look at how far some of the folks that have been here the least amount of time versus maybe someone who's been here 3 or 4 years, and I look at the difference, it's because we got serious about being really intentional about transfer of knowledge to include teaching, coaching, and delegation.
Right. And the truth is, it's not always a great time to delegate. I mean, that's the truth. No. So what about you've really explained the how and really given leaders, I think, an important 2 buckets, those 2 stages to keep your mind in training, keep your mind in coaching, and then it's okay. Mm-hmm. What about when? When is a good time or when is not a good time?
I would say delegation, I always think delegation is the right time when anybody needs to grow. So I look at delegation as a catalyst for growth and development. So that's when, and sometimes that's identified by the individual. I mean, we talk a lot about our progress plans and development plan meetings around here. Our team, they tell us what they want to learn next. So and obviously we can also make suggestions saying this particular, if you learned this, it's going to help round out where, what you need to get to the next level. But often they're asking to learn something new. Mm-hmm. So I think it's opportunity and growth. And sometimes someone can't see that for themselves, and I think, again, if we're going to talk about delegation in our world, it's the marketing work that needs to be delegated. But then now, as our company's grown and we have a leadership team and we have a succession plan in place, there's another level, almost this other type of delegation of me delegating to all of you running this business day to day and planning for the future. And that type of delegation and coaching and training, it's different, but the process should work the same. And so, again, I think it should also, a delegation should happen when it's going to take more time than what you have, and there's going to ultimately be a quality issue. That, too, turns into an opportunity for growth, and I can turn any of these around for that. But I think take more time than what you can afford to give to the project to have the best possible outcome.
And that's not something that people would do alone.
No, definitely not a decision to be made alone around here.
No.
We don't just independently decide we don't have the time. That's a discussion that we have. Like, why is that? Because in some instances, it can be avoided.
Yes.
And it can be also, I think things need to be delegated when they can be understood at a basic level of understanding. And that doesn't mean that you avoid delegating the complex things. You just need to approach the training and the coaching. You need to understand it's going to take a longer amount of time for that particular thing to happen.
Right.
So to be transferred, that particular knowledge to be transferred. And then I also think delegation needs to happen when you realize that you're doing something that's not your strength, that someone else can do and you can learn alongside them.
Right.
And so I think you've referenced this sometimes as being a parallel delegation, to where you admit, like, I don't know, I'm responsible for this, but I don't know all that I could. I'd like to work with you to learn how I can be better at this. Or you're delegating it to someone who can run with it and make the company more efficient and effective. So I think those are the times where I see delegation and kind of the indicators of when it's time for someone. But for around here, it's mostly and namely around opportunities for growth and development.
perfect. And I think, next, the natural question is, what I'm hearing you say is the line of thinking really is not who could I delegate to? It's who should
Correct.
I delegate to?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about how do you choose how to delegate or who to delegate to?
Right. And again, to be completely repetitive, which I know is my job, is looking for those where it's an opportunity for growth. Yeah. And like I said, this is something that's most often self-identified in our culture today, which we're extremely proud of. You also need to look at who has the time available, and does this person have the time now to learn that, or can they learn part of it now? Right. And I think it's being intentional about someone. You can't just assume that you understand everything that person has, on their list of responsibilities. So it's being intentional about who has the time available. I think the other thing, and this kind of goes hand in hand with what I said earlier, but hunger, someone who wants it.
Like, give it to me.
Right. And in our organization, we have, I'll give you a great example. A lot of people might say, I want to go through the logo development process, or I want to work on a website project. Well, sometimes we most often have those in progress, but maybe the best time to start is from, the beginning. And it may be a month or two before one of those projects come in. So it's managing the flow of work and those opportunities as well. And that's where the leadership and management team need to be skilled at these things so that they can identify those moments and when the time is right. Consensus, and that's big for us around here, is this person ready for that task, which doesn't always fall, and it shouldn't fall on the shoulders of one person to make that decision.
Right.
You all have now heard about Hannah. She's our director of people and operations. So she helps us manage. She knows everyone's time and the work that they have. And she can also, because she meets with everyone on a monthly basis, and we have weekly one-on-ones with managers, we know where people are in terms of their, honestly, like what they have in front of them and what's ending, what's beginning. And so we make those decisions in consensus most often around here. Yeah. And that also puts the person who's, transferring the knowledge and receiving it, puts both of them in a winning position. So, and then I think the most important, and I don't know that this is necessarily part of determining who, but once you have determined who is ready for this particular, project, this transfer of knowledge, is understanding that individual. The person who's delegating needs to be, or training and coaching and delegating, the person who's in that seat, they need to take the time to understand that individual. How do they like to learn? And that's why all of this self-work that we do around here, it's not just so that we know things about ourselves, but so that we can learn about others. And the Enneagram plays into this because our Enneagram numbers determine a lot of our communication styles. We take the DISC, it tells us how we like to receive and give information, or how we like to communicate. And the other tool, and we've mentioned this once before, and we'll put a link in the show notes, but Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni has really helped us understand more about individuals and what fills their tank, what type of work fills their tank, or type of thinking fills their tank versus others. So, for instance, just two examples of there's 6 working genius types. One of them is wonder, and that's on one end of the spectrum, and the other is tenacity. So if you're thinking about who to transfer information to, and you've identified who that person is, you need to understand what really fills them up. What part of this project is going to be easy for them, and what part of this particular, again, I'm using the word project, but whatever it might be, or is it going to drain them?
Right.
And know that going in, and ask thoughtful questions to the person that you're training, coaching, and delegating to about how they like to receive information. So I think understanding is critical, and it's an easy step. It doesn't have to be something that's more than a 5-10 minute conversation, but it's also thoughtful and helpful. And helpful first is one of our core values. So it plays right into how we want to not only show up externally, but internally as well.
Yeah, I think if the delegator could get their mind around the conversation, the training, the coaching really isn't about you, like the delegator. It's really about the person you're serving in that moment, serving
Correct.
from a growth perspective, serving from obviously a learning perspective. And then after that, it will serve you. But in the moment, it's serving the person. So if people could understand that, and that would lend itself to having more empathy to understand the person.
Right. I mean,
so that I can make this better for us both.
Right. Delegation should be an act of service. Yeah. I mean, I just don't think that we think about it in that sense and through that lens. And when we can, that's why I coined transfer of knowledge. It's a lot more service oriented versus handing something off to someone.
Right.
Let's keep going down this path and talk about the actual delegating and how you're leading delegation based on the framework that I shared with the management and leadership team. Talk to our listeners about how you're actually putting it into action.
Okay. So you gave us we've talked about it. These steps that you've provided, the framework was very, very helpful. Mm-hmm. And once we started living it out, I think it's just, maybe what I'm going to say isn't much different than what you've said. It's just the actual execution of it. So what we do is, literally if I go into training, it's explaining the job and what the task is at hand and why it means something.
Right.
So why is this important? How does this fit with our goals? How does this fit with our company goals? If it's something monetary that they're really impacting here, or what if it's from their progress plan or their development plan that they've asked for? That is where we talk about the importance of it, so that they're we're understanding that together. Then we talk about the actual task itself. So before I even get into the detail, I talk about you. I talk about the person that's sitting on the other side of the table. And then we have to really invest the time to write down the results. And a lot of times with our agreements with our clients, just because of our business, we will have results very well stated, clearly stated. So the outcomes are typically where I like to focus, and that helps us get on the same page, and they understand it immediately. And because what we do is marketing based, everybody understands what that means. And so they know where they're headed, and they know if that's something they do really well, or they know that this is going to be a challenge and I'm going to be along for the ride. Right. So it's good. So we make sure we understand all those goals, whether they're smart or not. Smart meaning measurable, actionable, actually doable. I can't recall the whole thing right now, but that's what it is. Smart goals. And then we have to understand when the expectations need to come to fruition. So when does this need to end? What is my first step? Maybe there are milestones along the way that I paint out for them. I plot out for them so that we're working against those milestones every step of the way. There is no ambiguity. That's really what I'm trying to, the way that you've set up the framework and the way that I'm executing it is, I try to leave little room for questioning. And if there are questions, it's more about the work itself, not the how am I going to do this, or why am I doing this, or when do I need to get this done? That's just stated. Right. It's really more about, let me learn now. Let me not worry about those things, and let me worry about my ability to learn how to do this, or my ability to crank this out with you because it's awesome and I love it and we both love it and it's going to be great, So
you've worked a lot on this and this particular step, I would say, and you're really leading, leading the company, changing some of our habits. So I've noticed some big changes in the way that you're working on this particular step.
Yeah. And thank you. And as we're growing, you actually have taught me this. After 15 years, I'm finally listening to your advice. So thank you for the advice. I finally hear you. But it's literally follow up.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple. Yeah. The delegation is, once that last step in coaching takes place, that delegation and the transfer of knowledge, then there's almost one more step. Confirm, right? Confirm, tie it up with a bow, just send an email, write out the details we've just discussed, tell them the who, the why, the when, and then promise that you're going to be along for the ride. Right. And live up to that promise. And it gets so much better. Right. So much better.
I think these are the particular steps, but then I know that there's some other things that really make what I'm seeing in our organization kind of making us more successful in this process.
And it's authority.
Authority.
Yeah. And you started that. I mean, you were using it with me. You were saying that, I'm empowering Megan too, and say it out loud.
Right. And I think what we realized is that, again, if it's giving someone the opportunity, you've got to give them the authority to do it. And I think that's also an uncomfortable feeling at times, and something that can be easily overlooked. And, but people want that.
Yes.
It's whether it's permission or authority, they want to feel needed and wanted and valued. And because we're so committed to being that type of company, it had to come in our actual work and teaching people and being intentional with that, so that they know and they can feel that trust. It all comes back to trust. And if we skip that step, I think we have a chance of really missing an opportunity for growth and development.
Agreed. And it offers folks the opportunity from an empowerment perspective and authority perspective, to your point, to offer their own ideas.
Exactly.
On how to proceed, which is so beautiful. And I know, I ask people a lot of times around here, I'll say, what do you think? Because I know if they know better. Like I know if they're asking me a question just to ask me a question, or if they're really asking me a question because they do not know. But 9 times out of 10, they have an inkling, right? And so I'll turn it back around. It's like that therapy loop, like just asking the questions over and over. Well, why do you think you're in here today? It's like, well, what do you think we should do next? And they'll answer me, and it's never wrong. It's their approach. But the fact that they're comfortable telling me that tells me that we're on a good path from a delegation standpoint, because they are confident and that they have been empowered to do this work and to move this thing forward.
Absolutely.
So that's a joy, actually, for me. And then the other thing is making sure other people know. So other leaders, once this person's been empowered and given the permission to go do this work, making sure other leaders know, other folks within the organization, so they can support them on this journey. And we really don't hide the fact around here that someone's working on XYZ. Oh, she needs to work on a website. To your point, she needs to work on a website. Everybody knows that around here. Like, we can see it. There's 20 of us in the office. So we know if, I'm going to use Marcy because we pick on her a lot. Marcy needs to work on a website, which she's done 100 of them in her career. But still, maybe she wants to work on a different kind of website. And everybody knows that. And now everyone can support Marcy on her journey to learning how to do a website.
Right. And we cheer each other on, and we know that someone's working. And because we don't believe in perfectionism, and we know that part of the transfer of knowledge, it shouldn't necessarily be, our expectations need to be in line. That someone shouldn't just be able to pick it up as fast as we did, which but then also, everyone learns at different paces.
They do.
And projects take different looks and feels. So it may be a website project, but every website's different.
Right.
And you fill in the blank for your organization, whether it's a sales opportunity or whatever it may be. Pretty unique most of the time, unless you're in some transactional type of work. And so I think that really also plays into the consciousness of the delegator is grace.
Yeah, it is.
And understanding. So
it really is. And then on the flip side, it's the, and this is really the final step for me, is making sure that they understand. So back to the, following up with details. Do you understand? I know we're looking at each other and you're understanding me right now as I'm passing this. We're working on this, but how about a week later?
Right.
So checking on results, checking in on progress made, checking in on, once you delegate something, you don't get to just let it ride off into the sunset. We have to stop and check along the way to make sure our gas is full and our tires are working and everything is still on track. So that's very important. And then really the most important, I think, of all is asking good questions.
Yes, it's by far, to me, and I think we've learned along the way, if we are engaging in this process and someone's not asking questions, there's most likely something's coming, because we know that thoughtful questions get us further down the path quicker. And I think, for a lot of organizations, and it was certainly the case for ours, is that you have to create an organization where questions are not considered weak or a sign of like it's opposite here. If you're not asking questions, like I just said, we're like, ruh-roh, something's probably someone's stuck,
right?
Potentially. And so I think, and that comes from a place of people, we take instruction and we take information. And even though again, the step of trying to understand one another, that still doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily approach the process, the actual work. And like, if I'm being delegated to and you're being delegated, if we're being delegated the same task, most likely as an Enneagram 9, and I know this from working with you, you may not ask me a ton of questions right off, but they come later because I think, 9s tend to deliberate and think on what they've seen and what's been given to them. Whereas I know for me, as a 7, I know that's also for 1s and also for 8s.
Curiosity is a gift.
And questions and context.
Right.
I mean, we all have different, we show up in the same way of we want to know more information. For me, it's in the form of a question usually, a curiosity, just what's the end game here or whatever it may be. But for 1s and 8s, a lot of times they're looking for context and curiosity. And so I think that is one of the beautiful things about the process is to the understanding piece of it.
Yeah.
And when I say beautiful is that when you get it right, you see the results happen. You see people succeed so much faster. And that's the beautiful part of it. The not so beautiful part of it is when you fail to do some of these things, which is why we're sharing all of this. It's because we failed to do it for a long time. So
that's so funny. And it's true. I mean, it really is true. And then there's the follow-up, right?
Right.
So in terms of advice that you can give just relative to following up with folks, I mean, I had talked about some things, but I'd love to hear from your perspective and your framework.
Sure.
What you announced as how we follow up well at DMA.
I'll just buzz through the list, but checkpoint meetings.
Yep. Totally the best.
Give helpful feedback.
Literally our core value.
Make yourself available. I think that's something that we struggled with is being conscious about when we can be available to answer those questions that we hope people are asking, in the coaching process and teaching process as well.
And this is hard because I think time is, people who are listening to this probably like, I'd love to delegate more, but I don't have time. Back to that. And I get it. We get it. Business owners, business leaders, it's hard, but you have to.
Correct. If you want to grow.
It's a necessary
and you want others to grow.
Evil. Like, I don't want to call it that, but it is a necessity.
It's a necessity for sure. And especially, like I said, is if you want people to grow and you want your organization to grow, leaders need to learn how to do this more effectively. Yeah. And we're going to put people, especially if you care about the individuals that you work with, and which I'm assuming
we all do.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the other one is accept risk and not perfectionism. Right off the bat. And you really need to keep your own biases in check around how quick you learned how to do that is just it's a trap.
It is.
It's an absolute trap. And I think that it's so easy to fall into. I know I have plenty of times.
Yeah. It makes people feel bad too. So we don't want to do that.
And then, again, I think it goes hand in hand with that is limiting standards to what is acceptable and again, giving grace for the learning curve.
That's right. And really, this goes hand in hand with the accepting risk and imperfection because, of course, your context is going to be different than my context. And, of course, people are going to have questions. So can you dive into this a little bit more? I mean, really, it's about learning.
I mean, in terms of...
when someone's learning.
And we've said it, and I'll repeat it again. And we learn differently.
Yeah.
We can't have all of this individualism as in terms of self-discovery and self-awareness. We can't be in these individual states which we promote and we believe in, and then just expect everybody to learn at the same pace or in the same way. It's just it makes no sense at all. But we did that for years.
We did, and
we weren't conscious of it. It wasn't a conscious thing we were doing, but we certainly did that. And again, I think y'all have heard me almost get on my soapbox, and they're eventually going to have to let me, listeners. But, it comes from a place of standardized learning. And having, put our daughter through Montessori school, we fell into that. By the way, that wasn't a strategic decision. It was an accident.
It was the right one.
It was the right one. And I learned about a different learning method. And when we start to think about that in scalable, as being applicable to businesses, we need to be the type of teachers and coaches that can adapt to different types of personalities and learning styles. And I think that's, again, I can't say it enough. I think that's critical. And I think that adds to probably the listener who's on the other side, adds to I really don't have time. And I think you have to change your mindset. And I think you have to find the time.
You do.
To be able to do it, because I could argue that none of us had the time. And when we approach this, and it's amazing that when you start to practice it, how you not only have the time, because once you effectively do it, you're going to have more time to do these types of things and other things to grow your business and to support the people around you.
That's right. And one of the things that you've taught me, and I know most of the people who've worked here, longer than 6 months, you will say from time to time, if someone's not growing, or if this thing isn't moving, or if the result, the proof isn't in the pudding, look in the mirror.
Correct.
So it's really about you, and now I can't unsee that. Mm-hmm. So now if someone gets stumped, or if someone is just stuck either on their growth or on a project or whatever, I have to think back, what did I do? How did I get here? How did we get here? How did I get us to this point? Because it's not about them. Mm-hmm. It's about me as the teacher.
Correct. If you're in the teaching and coaching phase, and I know what you're talking about. I know I've said it to you a lot, through the years, and folks around here, is they'd come to me and this is not going well, or this person's struggling. And my answer always is, and will continue to be, well, what have we done? Mm-hmm. What have we done about that? And what have we done for that person to make sure that they're in a winning position? And by saying that, I started to peel back this particular area of our businesses. We're not great. We're not great at teaching and coaching, and we can be better. And that's part of when I started to realize that, okay, they're coming to me and saying we have these issues,
right,
but they're not starting with what did they do to prepare the person for success, or whatever it may be. Again, there's so many examples of that. So
is there ever a time when someone shouldn't delegate? Is there ever a bad time for that?
Of course.
Yeah.
And, I think there's a lot of specifics, and it would come down to the particular type of work that you're doing or what, but I think most often for businesses that we work with and leaders that we work with internally and externally, is if the task or project requires only knowledge that you possess.
Right.
And I think that's also where we can get into a trap. Is I'm the only person that knows how to do this. Sometimes that fills our egos. Let's be honest about that. Mm-hmm. But other times when we're being healthy about it, it's like, I'm the only person that knows how to do this right now. And I know that I've been living through that in this succession planning, this journey we've been on for the last several years. There's a lot in this company that only I knew at the time how to do. And there was no rule book about it. It was a lot of what was in my head or what was in my gut. And so I had to get very intentional about that. But I think the mindset around is I'm the only person that knows how to do that right now. But what part of that project or that particular thing could someone start by helping to do an aspect of it? And again, right. I don't know what it is,
but
research,
the notes,
right?
Outlines.
What can they do? Can they study previous versions of that and then bring questions like, what does that particular what can I start to do, even though I know it's going to take a long time? So I think we shouldn't try to delegate when it's something that requires an enormous amount of context and learning, but let's break the delegation into smaller pieces. Yep. So I think that's a particular, a way to think about when to delegate and when not to. I think the other is timing. Mm-hmm. And I think timing plays into not only the individual that's being delegated to, but then also the timing for the organization. And I think, and for the clients. And so I think the way to think about that is this a time to delegate this based on the outcomes that we need to be successful for the individual and for the work? And because I think we have to think about quality and all the things that we're so customer centric that definitely at DMA that it's easy to fall into a trap of this person we need to delegate this, but then we don't think through it completely, and we end up with a quality issue on the other side, and now we have a disappointed client. We have on both sides. We have internal clients that are disappointed, and we have external clients that are disappointed. So I think timing is a real critical aspect to consider when that you have to think about when you're thinking about when to delegate or when to transfer knowledge.
And, we talk about Atlas and naming emotions. What we named these types of instances at DMA lovingly over the years is a hot potato.
Right.
So if it's something you've received that needs to be delegated, or something you're going to delegate because of whatever, I don't want to, or I just got it, something else is more important, I don't have the time. Yeah. It's called a hot potato because you're asking someone else to do something in a hurry that they may not have the skill set or time or anything to do.
Correct.
Business doing, quite frankly. And we're a marketing agency. And so hot potatoes are
common.
They come in.
Yeah.
They come in on the daily.
But what made them a hot potato is the way that we would almost just unthoughtfully pass it along to someone. And that's what we've tried to eradicate around here is obviously I don't know that hot potato was the term that was being voiced.
No.
Unlike, I want to get this off my plate.
Yeah.
But that's what we coined it. Yes. And it would make the other person, the person on the receiving end of it, just feel terrible and like they couldn't win or succeed. And so we knew that it was an action that was happening, and we just put a name to it, and so that we could help identify it in the moment, so that then we could then course correct when it was happening.
Yeah. And then on the other side of it, if I'm coming to you and going to know, I have a hot potato, like I need your help to talk through okay. Just tell me it's a hot potato.
Right.
Don't pretend like it's not. And throw this thing at me,
Correct.
All hot. So yeah. And really that's one of those things that if it happens too often, it can start to erode culture and morale.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is another reason why delegation is so incredibly important.
Yeah. Because there's a way to frame an immediate need or request, say, for instance, from an external client. If a client needs something,
we've got to do it.
We've got to take care of it. But it was the way we were framing it internally because we didn't have the right language or the right, an effective process for it. It was causing people to just be bitter and feel like they were failing instead of rallying to the cause of, I get to work on something that, our one of our biggest clients needs right now. I get a chance to step up and learn something along the way, but then also to be part of the customer service that we want to deliver as a company. It wasn't a morale builder. It was a morale destroyer in certain instances.
Yeah. So. You've really flipped the script on the delegation dilemma at DMA. And I just wonder, and I think this is a good thing to close on before we go into music, but what had we gotten our arms around this sooner, what do you think that would have looked like for DMA? How would that have changed us?
I mean, I think if we got our arms around a lot of this stuff sooner, but I definitely think from a work perspective and growth perspective, I mean, we're a successful company. We've been able to grow this business year over year. But I think about some of the talented people that we lost along the way.
Yeah.
I think if we would have been better at this, we could have potentially kept some of that talent on our team. And again, it's going to happen. People are going to move on. But I think that, and I think we could have, and potentially, taken care of clients in a more improved way. And again, we're a very blessed business of 18 years. But I think we would have just shown up in a more effective way. Again, I think our communication styles, what we know about ourselves, and this transfer of knowledge, those are three critical things that were really disrupting our culture. And so once we started to shape and shift that, and we got the right people on the bus in the right seats. Like that's kind of completing what's not completing because it's never finished, but that's definitely, those are the critical aspects to what's making our culture so healthy right now.
Mm-hmm. And really that's the gift of it all. It's the art of delegation. It's an art. It's an art form. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, yeah, we've really got a delegation problem, whether or not you realized it before or not, hopefully after listening to this, you have some helpful tools to help you navigate. But really, I think step one is to not think of it as a dilemma at all.
Or as delegation as being something that you're just handing off, and you're really thinking of the act as being, again, that's why I coined it transfer of knowledge, is that it's an act of service. Yes. And if we can treat training, coaching, and thus delegation as an act of service for someone, we're going to not only make that person, put them in a winning position and make them, again, improved by what they know and what they're learning, but also us. Mm-hmm. And if we're showing up as servant human leaders, this is part of that journey, learning how to do this in an effective way.
Yeah. Man, thank you for sharing that. This is a biggie. And again, thank you for, it's not private, but it is. It's personal. How about that?
It's definitely personal.
It's personal. Business gets personal. And this is us sharing what we've gone through, what we've learned, what Danelle has identified, and how it's making us better. So we hope it helps you.
For sure.
Let's move into a music moment. This is going to be fun because you've been gone for a hot minute.
I have.
So I have some news. While you've been gone.
Okay.
While you've been gone, major things have happened in like Hollywood and pop culture. Okay. First of all, there was a slap that happened at the Academy Awards, which is not music based, but hey, everybody's talking about it.
Right. You filled me in when you got to Paris. I appreciate the update there because I had no clue whatsoever.
Rough.
Wow.
Yeah. And we won't go into that because there's a lot of debate about it, but y'all know what I'm talking about. Those of you that haven't been in Europe for a month. And then the second thing that is slightly music connected is Jennifer Lopez. And she's engaged again.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez are back together again. I want to say their first round of this was when Cooper was born. So 15 years ago, my son was born. And I remember standing at the grocery store and looking at their pictures on the cover of the magazines. And now here we are again. They had a horrific breakup.
Okay. Well,
then I know. And Janelle's looking at me like I'm crazy. Just y'all can't see it, but this is like hot
you
stuff.
can if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, that's true. But you have got to hear about this. So, and they're engaged again.
Okay.
Why is that a big deal? Well, first of all, I thought A-Rod was the one.
You're losing me. So she's been engaged a few times. Is that what you're...
What I'm saying is we had a breakup 15 years ago.
Okay.
With the same person that we're now engaged to now. And in between then and now, we've had multiple suitors, maybe a husband.
Okay.
What? How many times does one get engaged? I hope this works. How about that?
Well, that's okay.
I hope this is the one for her.
Well, you seem pretty riled up about this. I listen, I think you should talk to someone about it. I just don't know.
It's not you.
I'm an empathetic person, but I'm really struggling right now to, yes, I guess
right.
she was.
Is J-Lo a good performer?
She's a great performer.
Right. Is she a good entertainer?
She's a great entertainer.
Is she a beautiful singer?
Wow. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know many of her songs.
She does have a beautiful voice.
Does she?
Yes.
I know her more as an actress.
She really does. Yeah. She's super talented.
Mm-hmm. But
right?
has she been married?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. You were right. I guess it is a big deal, but I don't know. Good for them.
It's just big news. As you come back from Europe,
that's
two big deals are slap and then this engagement, which is like number 4 or 5.
That just makes me not so sad that I was over there for a month. If this is the big news.
It's the big news.
Well, outside
there's other very serious things
serious. And I'm very briefed on those.
Yes,
I didn't put my head in the sand. I'll tell you that. No, I did not.
But on these things you did, which good for you that you could run from it in Paris, because here it's everything.
Well, I'm just okay.
Do you think she's collecting engagement rings? This is really what I want to know.
I don't.
Is this a collection?
I mean, it sounds like
approach,
it's
strategy.
I'm sure it's a nice collection, but I don't know. I don't know. I think you should. We're very excited. I want to tell our listeners she's really thrown me for a loop with this, and she's doing it on purpose because I'm kind of a clueless pop culture when it comes to.
It's like when I talk about sports.
Yes. So
you'll hear the opposite.
Right. Fair.
When Danelle's like, there was an interception and then a touchdown and it was a wrong team. I don't know. I'm like,
Exactly.
okay.
So I assumed, and in my mind, I was like, I'm going to figure out what she's going to talk about on Music Moment. So I thought it was going to be about tunes that I heard in Paris or particular things, but she went with Benifer. Wow.
Did you hear anything on that?
I did. Yeah, I did. I was looking forward to sharing it with our listeners. Is one of the things that really stood out to me is that I would be in cafes or I would be in even shopping areas or in stores, and they would have music on. And what I noticed more than not, I was expecting these beautiful French tunes. And so I was listening to all these playlists on Spotify and these French cafe acoustic, things.
Yum.
And that's where I heard your Edith gal that you had mentioned. But what I loved the most and what I was noticing time and time again is it would be American pop songs, like very popular, but being sung in French.
Ooh.
So it was fun.
Yeah.
So I remember one morning I was getting my coffee and I was listening and I was like, I know that. And it became a game with me. It was like, what is the song? What is the song? And in that particular instance, it was Mirrors by Justin Timberlake. But it was...
Was it Justin Timberlake singing it?
No.
No. That would be really something.
That would be really cool if it was. No, I Googled it and it was, some other artist, but the music was exactly the same. So I didn't expect that. I didn't expect the French to be playing, our music and singing it. So I started to create a little playlist of American pop songs in French. So that was one of my music moments. I have a few others, but since we took up some of the time with diamonds and engagement.
15 years later, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, with this episode. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Is there anything we want to remind our listeners about before we?
Sure. As always, we're going to put this information in the show notes, some of the stuff that we've shared. And just if you want to discuss this topic, if you're a leader out there and really want to, talk through transfer of knowledge, please send me a message and I'm happy to share with you even more details because I put together a lot of resources for the team that wouldn't necessarily go on the show notes, but we'll share a lot with you there on our website, selfsmarterpodcast.com. And then just again, I want to thank you for the feedback that we're getting and our numbers. While we're not looking for a particular set of numbers to be successful, we do know you're listening. We do know you're listening, and the conversations just keep getting richer, and we're glad that this, and maybe not every week, but for all of our listeners, but the content and the things that we're sharing are helpful to you because that's what we set out to do, and that's part of the legacy of what we want to leave behind. Is we want to help people maybe skip past some of the painful steps that we went through, but then also have resources, actionable resources that you can use as a leader in your organization or in your personal lives, the things that you're leading, and be more successful at it. That again, it's the application piece that we really want to be there for you on. And so thanks again. And the reviews, we really appreciate those because that helps other people find our content and our podcast. So thank you for that.
Thank you all. We send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Have a great day, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.